I came here today to listen to you and to learn, and I benefited a lot. I came here to thank you. Thank you very much indeed for this huge work you have done and for this huge experience you shared with us all. I thank the whole Global Commission on the Economics of Water to address the most difficult issues, the most complex issues we heard this afternoon. How to make water security fair and sustainable. I would like to thank you also for the method you are doing it by relying on a very robust science, underpinning your political messages and offering us the well-constructed knowledge. It's a prototype of thinking and prototype of methods we would like to see in many areas of the deliberations of the United Nations. We are missing it very much. We are painfully missing it. What you are offering us is a science-based systemic solutions. Not to complicate issues, but to make them working well. That's exactly what we need in time of crisis. That's exactly what we need when we are looking for lasting, integrated, and systemic solutions. The preliminary outcomes of your report are very, very encouraging. What I heard and what I read from you today and the previous days, just giving me the hope that you will offer very good solutions, workable solutions. I would like to encourage to go ahead. To deliver on the transformation, what we are about here in this house, we need to understand the interlinkages of challenges, all the challenges we face, and the nature of the drivers of the crises we are facing with. You are absolutely right, and I fully concur with those opinions I heard in the last 10 minutes as well, that we need to develop a new economics on water to unpack the various values represented by water. How to understand the different roles of water and the role of water as one of the drivers of the economy, one of the drivers of social and environmental sustainability. Your work will help us to secure more water, climate, eco and people-smart investments as well. Listening to your debates, I also understood that there might be still a lot of questions to be answered. Very difficult questions, but very relevant questions that will help us understanding some options that are ahead of us. Your answers will be very helpful on how to measure all externalities of the subsidies we are providing now, how to reset values and prices, how to factor in climate and eco-smart economic behavior into the decisions when thinking about loans and giving loans and grants. It is clear that the decisions and programs in this House should be based on scientific evidence. So far, they were not really based on scientific evidence. But you are indicating the way ahead, and I would like to thank you for that. The topic that you are working on is absolutely essential for a more circular economy, guided by more human and ecosystem-centric way of how we measure and value economic success. hopefully this will be picked up in the tomorrow's outcome summary and reflected in broad coalitions for action. And I'm also very hopeful that your approach will be respected and reflected in the institutional reforms we need in this House. We are going to discuss these reforms very soon. So once again, my big thank to you. Congratulations to all of you. And I'm very happy that I had the opportunity to spend the last couple of hours with you. Thank you much indeed.
Thank you very much, Excellency President of the General Assembly. It's not very often that a President of the General Assembly sits in a room like this throughout this discussion. And some of us that have been coming very often to this House are very aware of that. So really, thank you very, very much for that. And for your last commitment as well.
I'd like to thank President of the General Assembly, Csaba Korosi, for his leadership as well. And taking off from what he said, I'd like to say that the answer to many of the questions that we've raised also lies in global governance. And through a process of first building up coalitions of countries, coalitions of the willing, around the key missions that we're talking about to address the water crisis, hopefully eventually through either a water convention or water pact, we've got to find a way of using global governance to strengthen the right national and local governance. Because global governance can't just be an aggregation of the local. It has to be more than that. It has to be a way in which science, good economics, and good governance could flow down to the local as well. It's got to encourage, it's got to support. And that combination of sound multilateral governance and multilateral finance, critically finance, is necessary to support good governance and good economics of water. I'd like to end on that note.
And the report is actually a report that is whose call for action is relevant not only for water, but for most of the rest of the agendas. I mean, the bold recommendations are around reforming the economic system and the financial system are applicable also to the governance systems, and the fact that our governance system has been accepting inequality as a pattern. And this is where we are. The governance system that we have is also obsolete, and I think many of the stakeholders have been sharing that as well. This very House does not recognize local and regional governments as a sphere of government. We sit here accredited as civil society. So I think that these are the kind of issues that we need to address, and I think that acknowledging the different stakeholders as knowledge partners and decision makers, like the voices of the indigenous people, but also the claim from the farmers, is extremely relevant. I also welcome and thank the very great inputs from the organized youth to this panel. And with those comments, I would like to give the floor to, on behalf of the stakeholders, that was my role here. I would like to give the floor to Aromar Revi, Director of the Indian Institute for Human Settlements. Aromar, the floor is yours for the closing of the whole session.
Your Excellency, we've been talking a lot about the problems that we're facing. Tharman talked about regime change. In the last 5,000 years, what has ended civilizations and empires more than anything else has been challenges of water. But we're in a different context at the current point of time, because this regime change, if it works itself out, and I'll take you back to 30 years ago when we started the climate story. We were at 0.5 degrees of temperature elevation 30 years ago. We've gone through 30 years of negotiation. We're at 1.1 at the moment. We're headed for a 1.5 degree overshoot. If we start that journey with water today and land up where we are with climate just now, from our own analysis, there will be 1.2 billion people in the 2050s who will be seriously at risk of food security. and maybe 500 million people who are starving. That's going to be the biggest humanitarian crisis that we can ever see and touch. So I'm going to touch very quickly just now, not on the problems, but the solutions. Because the science is not only clear about the problems, the science is clear about the solutions. And actually, before the science, indigenous people have been very clear about what the solutions are for thousands of years. That's why we have our water and our biodiversity where it is. What might be slightly confused or confusing is the economics. And what is certainly confounded is the political economy. So very quickly, I'll take you through 3 slides. The first thing is the global water cycle is a local to global common good. And this is a very interesting challenge. It's not only a question of the local, it's also a question of building a multi-level system of governance, financing, and implementation all the way to the global scale. Where do we need to get? To the safe and just delivery of human well-being and ecosystem health by 2050. That is fundamental to our future. And that must be met within the global water limits, recognizing that the water cycle is a global common good. This is the challenge. We've talked about it in the SDGs. The PGA led that process 8 years ago. The challenge is to do it within the new bounds that we're talking about, which means transformational change from the local to the global. It means bringing together 3 agendas that are critical to this house: the SDGs, climate action, and biodiversity conservation. So how can we implement this transformational change? Some of you, especially in the podium, can't see this. And this is where I think the interesting question is. This is a systemic crisis, so it needs a systemic response. The most critical opening move in the response is a transition of the food systems, which touches us on SDGs 2 most critically, and SDG 1, because if you don't do SDG 2, you will never get SDG 1. Dealing with the health system crisis, this is what WASH is about. This is one of the most important factors in actually improving human health. This is about 150 years of improvement in public health that we've seen most effectively. After that, the core question of sustainable cities and communities and the infrastructure transition. In a world that's going to be increasingly urban, and we have the major groups here that deal with local government, this is one of the most critical questions that we have to deal with, but it has to be done in consonance with food systems and with health systems. And then you have the core question we don't talk about too much, which is about sustainable livelihoods. There is a narrative built around the climate transition that's linked to new green jobs. I can tell you, if we have to transform our agricultural sectors, our water sectors, our health sectors, we have a tremendous amount of new livelihoods that will be built about this new water economy. We need to understand it. We need to draw upon the hundreds of millions of people who are actually working in the sector and whose jobs will be transformed. Critically, to support that is a land use and ecosystem transition, SDGs 14 and 15, and of course climate. Biodiversity conservation transition, which is SDGs 14 and 15. Then dealing with questions of water quality, which we don't talk about very much. Somebody from the floor dealt with it quite clearly. That is targets 6.1 and 6.3. But finally, something that is very critical and I think close to our hearts in this room, and that is the societal transitions. If we are not able to, and this is a clear learning from COVID, if we're not able to mobilize citizens and people to actually deal with economic and gender inequality or economic and gender equality, this process is not going to work. So I've laid out for you 8 separate transitions which together will provide us the framework for the solution set that, among many others, and in consultation with yourselves, the Commission might actually go ahead and examine over the next year to try and see whether we can bring you something clearly for the summit to the future. So I'll stop there, and thank you very much for your attention, Your Excellency. Just a small remark here. You led us 8 years ago into sort of, let's say, the valley of the SDGs. I think it is your opportunity now to take us, hopefully, into a negotiation for a global compact or a global treaty on water. It's not going to be an easy task, but I think that's the necessity of the hour, and that's what a lot of the stakeholders in this room are actually talking to.